We sit here now in kitchen light in weatherboard homes and rental flats, in fibro shacks and fancy builds with their lawns cut straight as survey maps. And every one of us knows in one way or another, reckons we know what hard is. We mutter over power bills at the kitchen bench and we shake our heads at the servo sign, as though the numbers climb there in the dark, just to mock the working man. We watch the trolleys fill with less and cost us more. And we count the coins and we skip the little things and we tell the kids, not this week. We say maybe payday. We say she'll be all right. Though some days she doesn't look right at all. There's war again in places half a world away. Smoke climbing out of old cities, sirens in the dawn, and mothers clutching children in stairwells. And every screen in every pub and lunchroom spits out fear by the minute. Some orange trumpet from across the sea keeps blaspheming on and on, full of noise and ego and hot air, while decent people here and everywhere are left to make sense of the mess. And so we sit in this uneasy age, this loud and bawling age, where every fool's got a platform and every coward's got an opinion. And every genuine grief must jostle for its place between advertisements and scandal. And we say it's hard. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. But then once every year, before the birds have properly broken into song, before the sun has found its way onto the tops of the gums, while the dew still clutches to the grass and the cold sits low in the hollows we gather. At cenotaphs and country halls, by memorial stones in little towns you'd miss if you blinked driving through, by beaches and city shrines and schoolyard flagpoles, we gather. And the bugle sounds, and all at once, the years fall away. And I think of them. No statues, not names cut into marble, not sepia ghosts trapped in frames. Boys. God, they were boys. Stockmen with dust on their boots, shearers with burrs in their socks, and farmhands with sunburnt necks. Railway layouts and apprentice blacksmiths, drovers, clerks and roustabouts. School teachers and stable hands, boys who've never been 20 miles from home without their mother knowing where they were. And New Zealand too. The same sort of lads, from sheep country and river valleys, from cold green hills and hard little towns, with their own mothers waving from gates, and their own sweethearts swallowing tears so the boys would not see them break. What did they know of empire? What did they know of kings? Of treaties, maps and alliances and ministers? Or the polished men who sent them? Not much, I'd reckon. Not much at all. But they knew loyalty, and they knew duty, and they knew how to sit a horse, and they knew how to lend a hand, and they knew what it was to work until dark without complaint. They knew the weight of silence in a man when the season had gone bad, and they knew that mateship. They knew what mateship was before anyone bothered to even put a grand name on it. And when the call came for king and country and for honour and for empire and for adventure and for wages and for loyalty, for reasons noble and foolish and all mixed together like dust in a nor'wester, they went. They left barking dogs and creaking gates. They left the stock whips hanging by the shed. They left half-broken colts in the back paddock, and they left mothers standing stiff on verandas, hands twisted in aprons. Their fathers who said little because what was there to say that would just not make it worse? They boarded trains from the inland, steam and soot and waving hats. Troop songs sung too loud to drown out the fear. Girls on the platform trying to smile and little brothers running alongside until the speed beat them. And the old men, the veterans of other hard things, taking off their hats as the train rounded the bend. Then ships. Lord, the ships. Packed tight with horses and hope, with seasick boys pretending that they weren't, with letters being written under the lantern light, with dreams of glory and ignorance enough to make room for them all. They sailed from sun-struck harbours, past heads and capes and home itself, watching Australia fall behind into a blue line on the rim of the world. Maybe some stood at the rail at dusk, thought of the creek at home after summer's storms, and thought of a girl with strong hands and a ribbon in her hand, thought of the old dog asleep by the stove, and thought of nothing at all. Because thinking of home hurt too much. And then the world widened. Egypt, the desert, the flies, the pyramids standing right there, like ancient judges over all the foolishness of men. Strange ports, strange tongues, and strange skies. And the waiting, always the waiting, till Gallipoli. Till that hard-broken coast where dawn came over red ridges. And the sea itself seemed to hold its breath. They went ashore in the dark, those boys from the bush and the snow and the plains, boots slipping on stone and rifles clutched tight, hearts thundering louder than any drum. And from the cliffs above came fire. Not glory. Not the clean, brave painting men like to talk about. Not the banner snapping in a noble wind. Just noise and dirt and the blood and the shouting. Just men falling before their boots found purchase. Just boys calling out for their mothers they had not spoken of in years. Just the shock. The terrible human shock. Of learning in one split second that death had a face and it was looking straight at you. Those gullies and ridges names we know now like family names. ANZAC Cove, Lone Pine, Chinook Bay, the Neck. They were not legend then. They were hell with sun on it. The trenches were carved into misery and mud when it rained, dust when it didn't, flies black as sin, the smell of unwashed bodies, cordite blood, rot damp wool and bad water, men sleeping in snatches, men walking into shellfire, men laughing at jokes too grim to repeat, because if they didn't laugh, they might come apart altogether. And there were horses too, later, elsewhere. The light horse thunder over the sand, manes blown black, eyes wide and wild, Australians riding like the devil himself, was nipping at the heels of the world. Hooves drumming history into the desert, bridles slick with sweat, dust boiling up behind them, and men leaning low into courage. With bayonets glinting like a line of hard stars, brave beasts and braver fools, or maybe just brave men. Too young to call themselves anything else. And in the trenches of France and in places cold enough to freeze a prayer in your throat, the mud would swallow a man to the shin, and the guns would hammer the sky into pieces, and the wire would catch the living and the dead alike. There were rats fat as cats. There were trees cut into splinters. There were fields sown not with wheat, but with helmets and shattered bone. And still they went on. Because the mate on the left was still breathing. Because the mate on the right needed hauling back. Because somebody had to run to get the message, and because somebody had to go over. Because courage most times is not some grand shining thing. It's just the next hard step taken. With every sensible part of you says, stop. And some came home, but not as they left. Some came back with half a limb missing, half a lung, half their hearing, and half the light gone from their eyes. Some came back and never again could bear the sound of a slammed door or thunder in the Sunday afternoon. Some came back to paddocks they no longer knew how to walk, to wives that they loved but couldn't talk to, and to babies who cried at the sight of them. Some came back silent. Some came back angry. Some came back into pieces no doctor could stitch. And some just didn't come back at all. And in the towns all over Australia and New Zealand, the telegram boy became the dreaded shape on the road. Curtains twitched, a woman's hand flew to her mouth. As if distance might bargain with grief, a father would stand out over a paddock. And the school teacher stood before a class and somehow found words for children whose brothers would never return. Names were carved then, into stone, into timber to honour boards, into hearts where they'd stay the longest. So what did they fight for? That's the question, isn't it? Especially now. When youth crime has old people bolting doors before the sun's even gone down, and when pensioners stand in the supermarket aisle adding up whether it's the bread or the milk because they can't do both. When decent people work full weeks and still lie awake at night wondering how the bills got so far ahead of them. When kids grow up online before they've even grown up on earth, and when loneliness walks among crowds and truth itself is argued like a pub bet. When we seem so quick to divide, to sneer, to forget one another's humanity over politics or postcode or colour or class or whatever fresh excuse that the age invents. What did they fight for? Was it for this? For old diggers to be thanked one day a year and forgotten the next, for battlers to battle harder and for the young to lose their way, for neighbours not to know each other's names, for greed to sit in high places while the humble count coins at the chemist. What did they fight for? I'll tell you what I reckon. Not this bloody mess. No. Not this drift. Not this hardening of the heart, but the chance, the precious, breakable, hard-won chance for something better. They fought so ordinary people might live ordinary lives in peace, and so children might run in schoolyards instead of from shellfire. So women might hang the washing out in the sun without watching the horizon for smoke. So men might come home from work to the dogs at the gate and the supper on the stove, and to speak their minds without fear of a knock in the dark. They fought, however, imperfectly, for the hope that decency might endure. And hope, real hope, was never some fluffy thing. It was never a slogan. Never a pretty word on a politician's tongue. Hope is a hard thing, a working thing. Hope is a farmer sowing after a drought. Hope is a widow standing at a dawn service with medals pinned to a shaking coat. Hope is a school kid reciting the ode and meaning it, though they're only 12. Hope is a stranger buying bread for the bloke behind him when his card doesn't go through. Hope is a copper talking soft to a lost young fella instead of writing him off. Hope is a nurse on night shift, and hope is a volunteer at the RSL kitchen, and hope is a granddaughter listening when Pop finally tells the story. Hope is the bugle in the cold morning air, and hope is remembrance that changes how we live. That's where I look for it now. Not in the mouths of loud men, not in the markets, and not in the endless outrage machine that grinds us all into smaller, meaner versions of ourselves. I look for it here. In the hush before dawn, when the town comes together in an old meadows catching first light and in rough hands folded. In bowed heads, in the young carrying flags for the old, in the way that even the most restless child seems to understand that for one sacred minute, that this silence belongs to something bigger than all of us. I look for it in memory and in gratitude. In the stubborn Australian habit of showing up when things go bad. In the neighbour with the trailer after the flood. In the country women buttering hundreds of sandwiches for a fundraiser without asking who deserves it. In the fireys and ambos, and in the teachers buying extra pencils. In the teenager who stands up instead of joining in. In the family that takes Nan shopping. In the fella who mows the old widow's lawn and says it's nothing when it isn't. Maybe that is what they left us. Not perfection, not utopia. Not a nation free of flaws or foolishness or shame, but a standard, a charge laid in our hands. To be braver than cynicism, to be kinder than the times, stronger than selfishness, and to remember that freedom without decency is just noise. The pride without compassion is hollow. That remembrance means more than a sprig of rosemary in one morning in April, and it means asking ourselves every ordinary day whether we're building the sort of country worthy of what they gave. And maybe we've wondered, and maybe we've forgotten parts of it. Maybe we're tired. Lord knows we're tired. But I do not believe hope is gone. I think it waits for us. In the very places that we still come together. At dawn services and at kitchen tables and at gravesides, at school assemblies, in towns where someone always brings extra chairs. In city crowds that fall quiet for the last post. In the stories passed down, in the names spoken aloud, and in the knowledge that courage did not die in those trenches. It was handed on. So let the world be loud, and let the fools bluster, and let the markets rise and falls, and the headlines spit their panic. Here in this hour, let us remember the boys from Australia and the boys from New Zealand, the boys who sailed out of bright harbours and into history, and who stood in mud and fire, who rode through dust and gunsmoke, and who died far from home, with the taste of home still somewhere in their memory, who came back altered and who never came back at all. Let us remember them not only with sadness but with responsibility. Let us feed the hungry if we can, protect the old, and steady the young. Tell the truth and know our neighbours. Pull our weight and honour service by living well enough to justify sacrifice. And when the questions rise again, as it will, when you look at the price of fuel and the price of bread and the state of the world and the anger and the drift and the loneliness, and you ask, where is that hope? Say this: it's here. It's in the dawn, and it's in the silence, and it's in the remembering, in the hand laid on a mate's shoulder, and it's in the flag lifted by a child, in an old anthem sung, a little cracked, but true. In the voice, in the choice again and again, to be decent in an indecent age. That is where hope is. Not dead in a foreign field, not buried with the fallen, not lost to history. Alive. Fragile, yes, but it's alive. Alive in us if we're game enough to carry it. So stand easy, boys, from the ridges of Gallipoli to the deserts, to the mud and the slaughter of the Western Front, and from the lonely farm gates in Queensland and to the cold valleys in Otago. From every little town that sent its sons and felt the cost forever after. Stand easy. We have not forgotten you. And if this country still has a heart worth saving, and if this country still has a soul worth fighting for, then maybe it beats strongest here, in the half-light, and in the bugle call, and in the names, in the tears that we hide, and in the pride that we don't, in the hope you left us, in the hope we now must become.